Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Gamescript. Today, I'm going to be looking at the Dallas Cowboys versus the Detroit Lions. They're going to be playing in Dallas with Dallas as favorites in this game. And it is a game with big playoff implications and also a lot of narratives. And one narrative that I think should impact who we decide on our captain. So I'll get into that right after this. There is a ton of value in current underdog playoff best ball ADP. Elite offenses like the Bills are easy to stack. Take advantage of uncertainty and start drafting now. Use the promo code SEEK for up to $100 match on your first deposit. And subscribe to Heat Seeker Sports on YouTube for underdog strategy and drafting shows. Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching Gamescript. As I mentioned, it's a Saturday game, a special Saturday game, Saturday night. Detroit is traveling to Dallas to take on the Dallas Cowboys, and we're looking at a 52.5-point total with Dallas as 4.5-point favorites. And that's for good reason. Dallas has been playing a lot better at home than they have on the road. It's a game with some playoff implications. Dallas is fighting still to be the lead in the NFC East. And Detroit has an outside shot of being the number one overall seed and getting that first round bye. They need a lot of help to do it. San Francisco would have to lose out their last two games, and Detroit would have to win their last two games. But the possibility is on the table. So this is an interesting game because we've been looking at the Detroit Lions all season as like kind of the Cinderella team. They had a long history of bad seasons, and then this year their team finally kind of came around with Dan Campbell as the coach. He built a very, very good team over these past few years as head coach, and this is the year that they finally got out of the shallows and they're starting to drag teams into the abyss, as Dan Campbell's speech on Hard Knocks a couple years ago went. And they're one of the dangerous teams this year, and they are facing off against Dallas. Dallas, as I mentioned, they have a little bit more to play for this week because they're trying to win the NFC East still and trying to get home field advantage. And home field advantage for them in the at least the first round is going to be huge for the Cowboys because they play much better at home than they do on the road. And it should impact the outcome of how their playoff run goes. So before I get into all the analysis, make sure to hit the like button. Looking for about 15 likes, so I put out a shorter video a little bit later on. Make sure to hit subscribe on the YouTube page. I'm almost at 300. Looking for 400 subscribers before the end of the playoffs, and I'm at about 295 right now. So help me get to that 400 number. So hit that subscribe on the YouTube page, and you're going to want to hit subscribe anyways because that's where I put up these short videos. You're going to want to get the alerts when those go up. Usually a little bit before lock, but you never know when they're going to pop up, and you're going to want to be signing up for alerts. And in order to do that, you got to hit the subscribe button. And on top of that, I am running a promotion with Underdog right now. If you use the promo code SEEK when you sign up for a new account on Underdog, you can see it right down here, SEEK, just like Heat Seekers. When you sign up using that promo code, Underdog is going to match you up to $100 on your first deposit. So that's really good. That's free money. And right now, Underdog has playoff best ball going on, which is a great tournament that they run. And you get to draft teams that you think are going to make it into the playoffs, basically. It's all about stacking your players in playoff best ball, and it's all about kind of predicting which teams are going to advance the furthest in the playoffs. And if you are able to kind of project which of these teams are going to make it into the playoffs to begin with, then you can get an idea of the matchups in round one. And when you have an idea on those matchups, you can pick out the players that are going to upset other teams like that are considered to be favorites. I have a few that I've been talking about on my shows. So you're going to want to watch my playoff best ball shows also on the YouTube channel, and also another reason why you want to subscribe there. But on top of that, if you sign up using the promo code SEEK, I'm going to send you my rankings for playoff best ball. And I've done a lot of digging, a lot of research, and a lot of analysis already as far as the teams that I like advancing to the playoffs and through the playoffs, which is going to be huge. You want to get those Super Bowl teams in there. So make sure to sign up. use the promo code SEEK, and you'll get hooked up with that. Just send me a message if you use the promo code SEEK, because I'm going to email you my rankings personally. And you can find me on Twitter at Pumacom. So let's get into this analysis now. The game is going to be one that has a few narratives going on. The first one involves Ceedee Lamb. Ceedee Lamb is on the verge of breaking a couple of Michael Irvin's franchise records. And one of those is a little bit easier obtainable. He only needs 3 receptions, I believe, to break the most receptions record by Michael Irvin for the Cowboys. And the other record is one that's a little bit more interesting to me. And that one is he needs about 180 yards to break Michael Irvin's Cowboys record for yards in a season. And as we know, the seasons got extended a couple years ago so that there's 17 games instead of 16 games. So Ceedee Lamb's not going to want that hanging over his head that it took him 17 games to break Michael Irvin's record. And he is right now about 180 yards short of that. So he needs 180 yards, which is completely obtainable. If we look at the matchup against the Detroit defense, the best matchup for Dallas is in the slot. Detroit's been allowing 21.6 DraftKings points a game to the slot. And on top of that, the best DVOA matchup is for Ceedee Lamb in the slot. So he's got a great matchup to get this accomplished. He's got a game where they're going to need to put up points. They're probably going to be throwing throughout the game. And I can guarantee you that Dak is going to be trying to help his buddy Ceedee Lamb break that Michael Irvin record. They don't want to do it in 17 games. They want to do it in 16 games. They need 180 yards to do it. So even if he gets 120 yards, 130 yards, that's good for us, especially if we want to have him in the captain. So Ceedee Lamb is a tremendous captain option. He's going to be also the highest owned captain option tonight. So we'll build one with Ceedee Lamb, and then we'll try to get a little bit different with it. But Ceedee Lamb is probably hands down the best captain option on the night as far as a opportunity to score the most points tonight. And let's see, Amon-Ra St Brown is another option for tonight. I don't know if he's necessarily a great option tonight because Dallas is only giving up 13.4 DraftKings points a game to the slot. Amon-Ra runs 57% of his routes from the slot. He also runs 42% from the outside, where Detroit is giving up 16.5 DraftKings points a game. So Amon-Ra has kind of a middling matchup, but he's a guy that Jared Goff is going to lean on, especially with the type of defense that Dallas runs. They run a lot of man coverage. They run a decent amount of zone as well, but as far as league usage, they're among the highest in man coverage that they run for their defense. So that's going to set up Amon-Ra to get a decent amount of targets tonight because he is targeted in man coverage. But another guy who is targeted in man coverage is Sam LaPorta, and I'll get into him in a minute. But if we look at Amon-Ra recently, 32 DraftKings points last week against Minnesota, a tough defense that gives a lot of pressure. 27 DraftKings points against Denver, another tough defense. 5.1 against Chicago, that's another tough defense. 12.9 against the Saints, another tough defense. 18.5 DraftKings points against the Packers, another tough defense. And again, with Chicago, 21.7 points. So he's been having big games against tough defenses. The Raiders, he put up 20 DraftKings points. That's another tough defense. The Ravens, he put up 26 DraftKings points. They've had a lot of tough passing defenses that they've faced. And of course, they're in a division where they got 2 decent pass defenses in the Packers and the Vikings. But the Chiefs, he also put up 19 DraftKings points. So long story short, I've already told the long story, but Amon-Ra is pretty much matchup proof. And so that sets him up as a guy that we want to have exposure tonight to. And with a discount, we're going to get on Amon-Ra over Ceedee Lamb. he might make a good captain because he's going to have about half the ownership of Ceedee Lamb. So Amon-Ra is a guy we want to keep an eye on for our lineups. Dak Prescott is another guy that should do well tonight against Detroit's defense. Detroit is giving up 20.6 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position, which is a high number of points. And Dak Prescott, when he's playing at home and he's comfortable and he's in a game environment where they're going to need to score a decent amount of points, most likely, then he is going to be a guy that we want in our lineups. Because look at these point totals that he scored recently. 28 versus Seattle, 35 versus Washington. That was an easy matchup. 41 versus the Giants, 31 versus Philly, 32 versus the Rams. Most of those are easy matchups. 24 versus the Chargers. So he does well in easy matchups, and Detroit should be an easy matchup as far as a quarterback perspective, which puts Dak Prescott in position to score points tonight. So we got a lot of these high-priced guys that are in good spots. Jared Goff, I'm not as high on Jared Goff. He has the upside, like to put up a decent game, but Dallas's defense is a little bit tough. And as we can see, they're giving up 18 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position, which isn't great. In his tough matchups, he scored 31 versus Denver. That was at home. He put up 24 against Green Bay at home. He put up 24 against the Chargers on the road. He put up 25 against Tampa Bay on the road, 27 against Carolina at home, and 26 for Seattle at home. So most of his good games come at home. He has had one or two good ones on the road, but given the amount of guys at the top of the salary range that are in good matchups, I think Jared Goff is an odd man out tonight. But as we know, I said Joe Flacco was the odd man out 2 days ago, and he ended up biting me in the ass and having a big game. So he was actually the only guy that I was missing from my lineup that would have made it a big night. But Joe Flacco and Jared Goff, different guys, but Jared Goff is in a situation where it's expected that he might not score that many DraftKings points against a tough Dallas defense on the road, which makes him attractive ownership. Let's see. Gibbs is another one of these high price guys that is in a good matchup because the Cowboys, probably the best way to attack them pretty much is with the running back position and wideouts. But, Jahmyr Gibbs has been on fire lately. Dallas not giving up a ton of points to the running back position, but they should be focused on the run tonight, and Jahmyr Gibbs is a talent beats matchup type of guy. Dallas giving up 19.8 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. Lately, Jahmyr Gibbs, 25 DraftKings points against Minnesota, 27 against Denver, 17 versus Chicago. Chicago's a tough run D for the most part, or it used to be. 21 versus Chicago in that other matchup, 26 versus the Chargers. 33 versus the Raiders. Just a string of 20-plus point games, which makes Jahmyr Gibbs a dangerous guy to have and a dangerous guy to fade. So David Montgomery with the game script, if you're expecting the Cowboys to be playing with a lead, then maybe you don't want so much David Montgomery because he's more of a guy that you want when your team is the favorite. And that they're going to be, salting away a lead and all that kind of stuff. Gibbs is the guy that I'd probably lean on more, like as the guy from playing behind. But if you want to do a script where the Cowboys are losing and the Lions are winning, and that gets you David Montgomery in your lineup, that makes sense as well. Tony Pollard is a guy that has gotten a lot of shit this year. He was a guy heavily touted by just about every fantasy analyst as going to have a huge year this year now that Zeke was finally out of town. But as we've seen, Tony Pollard has not had a good year, and Zeke is actually having a pretty decent year with the Patriots. And Tony Pollard, the last couple weeks, 5 points, DraftKings points, and 8 DraftKings points. He had a little stretch there where he went 18, 23, 17, 16, which was about as good as the stretch that he's gone. He had one in the beginning of the season, 22, 19.9, and 18. So he has the upside, and he probably will be low owned. I think there's a narrative against Tony Pollard. Everybody, regretting their stands on Tony Pollard. And then on top of that, Tony Pollard had a disastrous 1-yard run last week where he couldn't get into the end zone. He had it wide open for the taking, and he got helicoptered out of the end zone. So Tony Pollard is, a guy that has upside, but a guy that will likely be low owned. With Detroit only giving up 19.4 DraftKings points a game to running back, he does not have a great matchup either. So Dallas will probably likely be focused on the passing game, and Tony Pollard is likely not to have a decent game tonight, but you never know. Let's see. Sam LaPorta is the next guy, and Sam LaPorta is in a good matchup against the Cowboys. They haven't given up very many DraftKings points a game, but when tight ends are targeted against them, they do pretty well, and it sets up Sam LaPorta to have a decent game. And he was quiet last week. He had 29 DraftKings points against Denver. He had 5 against Chicago, and then other than that, he's been having a lot of great years, great seasons, great weeks this season. So you see 32 points, 17 points, 20 points, 11 points, 20 points again, and a bunch. He's a great year for a rookie tight end, and he might go a little bit under-owned given the DraftKings points per game matchup he has against the Cowboys this week. If we go on to Ferguson has a little bit better matchup with Detroit, giving up 11 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. And Ferguson is a guy that Dak likes to target, and he's targeted him 8 times, 4 weeks in a row with 8 targets. And he's put up 19.7, 12.2, 10.4, and 8.5. If he got a touchdown, that's the difference between a 12-point game and a 19-point game. So, if he'd got touchdowns in any of these weeks, it would have been a much bigger game. I think he gets a touchdown tonight, potentially, and that would, maybe put him in the 16 DraftKings points range tonight that I would project for him. But Jake Ferguson, a guy that you probably want in your player pool tonight, another of Dak's favorite targets. Now we can skip down. So I haven't had anyone that I don't like tonight. So that pushes me even more towards, maybe an over situation. Jared Goff's the only guy that I really not super high on, but a lot of guys in good spots. Brandon Cooks is another guy in a good spot because the Lions are giving up 14.2 DraftKings points a game to the wideout position. So it's a middling spot. It's not a horrible spot, but that sets up Brandon Cooks, like to have a decent game. So you got to keep, like on the in the player pool, but maybe not so much of a situation where you're going to up his projection too much. 10 DraftKings points last week. He's been hit or miss too. He really needs a touchdown to get there. He's getting decent targets, but last week he only got 2 targets. 6 targets a week before that, 5, 4, 5, 4, 10. That 10 spot was the 35-point game he had against the Giants. I believe, I don't think that was on, that might have been on Thanksgiving. I remember I had him recommended as a captain option one of those weeks, or I was high on him, and he ended up having a monster game. But Brandon Cooks is a guy that you want to have exposure to, but I don't think you need to go crazy tonight. Aubrey is another guy that in any type of these shootout environments or just games against good opponents, then the kicker is in play. And Aubrey's been a monster this year. He's been quiet the last 2 weeks. 22 DraftKings points in week 14, 15 in week 13, 9, 13, 12, 11, 18, 10. You see a lot of those big games in there. And Brandon Aubrey is a guy that is a decent option tonight. Let's see what his flex salary is. Aubrey's got 4,800 for his salary, which isn't horrible, like given the slate. It's a night where the defenses are actually cheaper than the kickers, and we haven't seen a ton of that. So yeah, the kickers in play, but they're pricey. Badgley, he just joined them in week, or he's only had 2 weeks where he was the starter in week 15 and 16, and he scored 6 DraftKings points in each of those games. I think he took the job when Patterson missed a couple field goals, and then he missed a couple extra points. So Badgley has come in there since they cut their kicker. He hasn't really done much, but that doesn't mean that he won't do anything tonight. As I mentioned with Aubrey, yeah, it's basically the same situation as Aubrey, except he doesn't have as much of a track record as Aubrey. Given the nature of these defenses, though, you might expect the Lions to stall out a little bit more in the red zone than you would with the Cowboys. So Badgley might have a little bit of an edge there with field goal opportunities. Cowboys D is a good defense, and they're an aggressive defense. They haven't really done too much recently, but they're probably due, and especially in a game where they can solidify their case to lead the NFC East. Last week they only scored 1 point against Miami. They scored 0 points against Buffalo. They got 11 versus Philly in that win they got versus Philly. -1 versus Seattle. For the most part, versus tough teams, Dallas has not been good this year, and versus weak teams, they've excelled. 16 versus Washington, 21 versus Carolina, only 8 versus the Giants, 2 versus that first Philly game, 15 versus the Rams, 27 versus New England, 15 versus the Jets, 37 versus the Giants. So they're a bully team. They pick on the weak opponents. Don't do that great against the tougher opponents. And, maybe this is a tougher opponent in the Lions tonight that they don't do well against, but they're playing at home and they have a chance to improve their playoff standing. So don't be surprised if the Cowboys D have a decent game against Goff on the road. Lions D, let's see, they've had a few weeks with double-digit points. They got a 12, 10, 10, 16 in there. So they haven't been horrible, but they've been horrible like in the points allowed category. 24 points allowed to Minnesota, only 17 to Denver, but then 28, 28, 29, 26, 38. Those are the stretch of games points that they've allowed, and that was against Chicago, New Orleans, Green Bay, Chicago, and the Chargers. So not the murderer's row of offenses there, but teams that were able to put up good points against the Lions, which makes a case for the Cowboys offense even more. Jameson Williams has been getting a decent amount of targets lately. It seems like they're actively now trying to get him involved in the game plan. 6 targets last week, 7 targets the week before, 9 DraftKings points and 9 DraftKings points in both those games. He is a guy that, he was drafted in the first round a couple years ago. He missed a large portion of his rookie season with an ACL. He missed a large portion of this season with a gambling issue that he got suspended for. And so he hasn't played a whole ton of games. And Dan Campbell is a guy that likes to work in those rookies. You saw it with Jahmyr Gibbs. It took him a few weeks to work him in. And honestly, he might still be working in if David Montgomery hadn't got hurt and Gibbs had a chance to break out. And, Sam LaPorta is an exception, but he's a tight end, which was Dan Campbell's position. But, we've seen it like with Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra took, probably till mid-season before he got his opportunity to break out in his rookie year. Jameson Williams now has probably had a full season's worth of games under his belt, or he's close to it. So he's getting more opportunity. He's got 7 targets a couple weeks ago, 6 targets last week. He caught 4 receptions and 5 receptions. Jameson Williams is on the radar for a breakout game. So keep that in mind, especially in this matchup against Dallas, which is giving up 16.5 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. And that sets up Jameson Williams to have a decent game tonight. Let's go on to Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds been getting a little bit. He's still in that middling range of targets. He gets about 4 targets a game, but he doesn't really do too much with it. But he's a guy who's always a danger to score a touchdown. And if you need the salary relief, I tend to lean Jameson Williams tonight, but Josh Reynolds is also an option. Michael Gallup. A couple weeks ago, I had a showdown show against Philly where I recommended putting Cook in the captain and going cheap with a wideout in the captain spot, and it ended up being, I think Michael Gallup ended up being in the captain of the winning lineup of that the game that week of the DraftKings contest. He had 13.8 DraftKings points that week, which at a very cheap salary was enough to get him in the captain spot. And I was off by one guy, basically, had Cooks instead of Gallup, but Gallup was the guy, and he got the opportunity that week. He had 5 targets, so you never know when he's going to be getting the targets over Cooks. But just keep that in mind with Gallup. Cooks is more likely to have a bigger game than Gallup, but Gallup still exists, and so does Jalen Tolbert. He's another one of those wideouts for Dallas. 2 targets last week. Few games where he's had 5 targets, but Jalen Tolbert, he's a guy to keep in the player pool at 2,400. He's a guy that rotate out with Michael Gallup. When you've got Gallup in your lineup, you probably want to try to get swap out at least one of those lineups for Tolbert. Khalif Raymond is another one of these cheaper guys. He gets a decent amount of targets. He's been leaned on by Goff in spots before, but I don't know if this is the spot for him, but he's had against Green Bay on the road, he got 14.6 DraftKings points. So he has shown upside relative to his salary at 2,200. So maybe a guy to leave in there, but I wouldn't go heavy on Khalif Raymond, and I wouldn't be putting him in a lineup with Jameson Williams either. Probably. I mean, I'm sure that'll end up happening now, but keep that in mind. Kevontae Turpin is a guy that's had opportunity, not so much recently, but we've seen him come in and score those touchdowns a couple times this season. $2,000 salary. I think you can do better there, but in a shootout environment like this, maybe don't rule him out if you need the salary relief. Schoonmaker. I mean, I think Turpin would probably be. Actually, there is one more guy that I'm interested in. That's Deuce Vaughn. Rico Dowdle is out tonight. Tony Pollard has been underperforming, and Michael, the head coach of the Cowboys, was quoted as saying that, what was he saying? McCarthy was quoted as saying Deuce will be up this weekend. We got a plan and looking forward to it. That was his quote regarding Deuce Vaughn. Deuce Vaughn's at $100,000 salary. I would not be surprised to see him get opportunities, given the struggles that Tony Pollard had and the high publicity of the failure of Tony Pollard to get in the end zone from 1 yard out last week. That puts Deuce Vaughn in an interesting spot at 1K. Keep him in your player pools because he's a cheap guy, and I like him as probably my last guy in this dumpster diving range. Don't really see anyone. Hendershot, he's always interesting. He got 2 targets last week, 1 target the week before that. He just Ferguson's just doing too good this year. But Hendershot, he's another guy. If you're in 400 range, he's an option. But my lowest I like here is Mr. Vaughn. So let's start building a lineup. As I said, Ceedee Lamb's probably the best option at captain, and I like that narrative he's got going for him. I'm going to put Prescott in there too because I think Dallas is going to be aggressive, and maybe I think we're going to have to choose between Amon-Ra and Gibbs when we're building lineups today. But let's put in Amon-Ra for this one. No, let's put in Gibbs because Gibbs is going to be they're going to need to run the ball, and they're going to need Gibbs a lot tonight. So let's put Gibbs in there. And that leaves us with 43.66 per person. Let's go to our cheap range. Let's grab Vaughn there. Let's use that value. That gives us $6K per guy for 2 spots left. I think I like Sam LaPorta and I like Ferguson. But I do like Jameson Williams tonight. So I'm putting Jameson Williams in there. Leaves us with 8,700. That situation is pretty good. We can put Montgomery. You could double running back it if you want to use Pollard. But I'm using Vaughn because if I use Vaughn, it's because I don't think Pollard's having a great night, and I want to go in a different direction. But Montgomery is there if you wanted to double up your running backs. You have LaPorta as an option, who I like. You have Ferguson as an option, who I also like. If you put Ferguson in there, you'd be 4-2 Dallas. I think that's going to be the heaviest direction for tonight. I think most people are going 4-2 Dallas. If you want to get it different with your lineup construction, you go 4-2 Detroit tonight. And 4-2 Detroit can easily play for a Dallas wins build too. If it's just Dak and Ceedee, for instance, if you have just those guys in your lineup, 4-2 Dallas is going to have 37.5% ownership versus 4-2 Detroit, which is looking at around closer to 14%. So keep that in mind when you're building your lineups and you want to get different. But this is a good direction to go for Ceedee Lamb based on the rundown I gave of this player pool, and it makes sense. Dak Prescott is throwing to Ceedee Lamb and potentially Ferguson. Let's say if we put Ferguson in there. Deuce Vaughn gets the, maybe a goal line opportunity, or he gets an opportunity and he breaks one off tonight at $1,000. On the opposite side, you got catch-up mode with Jared Goff throwing frequently to Jahmyr Gibbs and launching bombs to Jameson Williams, who connects on one finally and puts up, around 16, 17 DraftKings points. So that is what I would envision for a build like this. Let's show you what the optimizer is saying. The optimizer likes Dak Prescott in the captain. Also a good option. Ceedee Lamb, they got in there. They got Tony Pollard, who my thoughts on him. I don't hate him, but I also am not going out of my way to get him in my lineups. They got Brandon Aubrey, who I like. I think he has potential to have a big night. And they got Jake Ferguson in there as well. So as you can see, they're going with that 4-2 build as well. Let's find him real quick here. Ferguson. And then they have 3,900 left over, and you can use your imagination there. You have the Lions. You have Jameson Williams, Michael Gallup, Josh Reynolds, Tolbert, all those guys in that range. So actually, they got I guess that would be a 5-1 build that they got going on. So, yeah, they got a 5-1 Dallas build going. As far as where that would get you, that's about the same amount of ownership as a 4-2 Detroit build. So if you think Dallas blows them out tonight, which is possible, Goff on the road type of thing, then, that'd be a direction you could explore. If you wanted to swap out Pollard for Deuce Vaughn in that build, you'd be left with 10-7. That gets you Goff. That gets you Gibbs. That gives you Montgomery. So it gives you an option to go 5-1, I guess, with a different lion in there. Let's see. If I had Jameson Williams, who did I swap out to get him? Ferguson, Lamb, Aubrey. They got Jameson Williams. I'm trying to figure out what I did wrong. They got Dak in the captain. They got Aubrey, Ferguson, Pollard, and Lamb. Dak in the captain, Aubrey, Ferguson, Lamb. We swapped out Pollard for Vaughn. Well, they would have Jameson Williams if you went with Pollard, but if you swapped out for Vaughn, you could get up to Jahmyr Gibbs instead. Let's just put it that way. And you'd have options for Montgomery, LaPorta. You'd be left with options. It's a pretty good build. I like what Vaughn does for that lineup, but I also like Jameson Williams, so I don't hate the Pollard build either. So it's actually a optimizer build that looks good on first glance. So good there. Let's do a Detroit wins build. I think it's Detroit wins likely going to come a lot on the back of Jahmyr Gibbs. But let's say we get that Jameson Williams breakout game, and we want to put him in the captain because we got a lot of studs in this game, and we want to have a lot of room to put in our guys. So Jameson Williams in the captain. We want to put in Lamb. We want Brown, St. Brown. We want Prescott, and we want Gibbs. That leaves us with 2,700. Look at all those studs in there. That leaves us in Tolbert range. We can put in Raymond. We could put in Turpin. We could go down to Vaughn and leave money on the table. A lot of options in that range when you go in that direction. Get you all your studs in there. Question is, how is Jameson Williams going to perform tonight? That's a big question. If we put in Deuce Vaughn and we wanted to, go different at captain there, we'd have Cowboys defense as an option. Jameson Williams is the best option in that range. So it gives you an idea of what you can do when you go cheap this week. But let's say we want to put in Jahmyr Gibbs in a Detroit wins build. Let's put Gibbs in as the captain. Let's go with Lamb. Let's go with St. Brown in this one too, because he's having success if they're winning. Let's go with Deuce Vaughn, our salary saver. Gives us 6,400 left to play with. Let's do Ferguson in this one too. It gives us 6,600. If we went with LaPorta instead, leaves us with 5,600, which is a better use of our salary probably. That gives us Cooks, Aubrey, Badgley, Cowboys D, Lions D, Jameson Williams, all his options. If we wanted to swap out Vaughn for Williams as our cheap guy, leaves us with 3,200, puts us in Reynolds, Gallup, Tolbert range. But I think that Deuce Vaughn is going to be a good salary saver as well. So keep him in mind. Now, Deuce Vaughn could completely bust. Don't get me wrong. I'm going off of coach speak here, and I'm going off of recent performance of Tony Pollard. But I would not be surprised with Rico Dowdle out to see Deuce Vaughn get an opportunity. He got a lot of hype going into the preseason. The coaches love him. He is the son of one of the coaches, and there was a moment in the draft where the father got to call his son and tell him that they were drafting him. So, Deuce Vaughn, there's a lot of emotion there with him. So don't be surprised to see Deuce Vaughn get used tonight. I don't know how he'll do with the usage he gets, but maybe he gets opportunity and maybe it pays off for him. But he's $1,000. So do with that information what you want. And, hopefully some of these builds help you. In this particular build, I think it would make sense to have Goff in this build. Obviously I got LaPorta, Williams, St. Brown, and Gibbs. So maybe, like Ferguson is a little bit better way to go. So I don't have so many passing options without Goff. But it's hard to get Goff in a build like this. You could maybe take out LaPorta. Let's put in Goff, see what that looks like. That's going to leave us with $200. That doesn't work. So it's a little bit tough with these expensive captains this week. And I don't even have Dak in this lineup either. So maybe I put in Dak. If you want to go Dak instead of one of these other guys, that's going to be tough to do too. I think if you want to go Detroit captain and stack it with like a Detroit build, you're going to have to choose between Dak and Lamb basically. So let's get out let's get out Dak, because I do think that Lamb is going to be they're going to make an effort to get him that 180 yards. Let's just stick with that. And LaPorta, and I had in Jameson Williams, left with 3,200. If we go with Fawn, where did that leave us? That left us with 5,600. That might be the better way to go. I think if you go Vaughn over Jameson Williams in that particular build, because you don't want to have too many of those passing weapons on Detroit with no quarterback. And this would give you an opportunity to put in Cooks, give you a 3-3 build. You could put in Aubrey, still gives you a 3-3 build. And it would make sense to have Aubrey in there because the Cowboys aren't scoring as many touchdowns in that scenario. You could have Badgley in there. That helps justify having these passing weapons without Goff in there and having them play, like with a winning game script. So that makes a lot of sense. Or you could go, like defense in this build and leave a bunch of money on the table. But, those are some directions. Make sure to hit that like button. Looking for 15 to put out a video a little bit later on when I have more complete thoughts. And also make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Looking for 400 subscribers. I'm almost at 300. I'm about 5 away from 300. So get me there first. 400 we're aiming for the end of the playoff season. And then make sure to sign up for Underdog using the promo code SEEK right down there. SEEK, like heat seekers. And use that. Get that $100 match on your first deposit for new accounts. And hit me up on Twitter at Pumacom to let me know you signed up. And I'll send you my rankings when I have those finished. I'm going to be doing those. I'm going to give it another week of games under our belt so we have a little bit more clarity. There's a lot of uncertainty right now with the playoffs, but if you want my thoughts on the teams that I think can make it through that uncertainty, check out the playoff best ball shows that I've done. They're on my YouTube page. I did one the other day with Spread. Spread Stare is a betting expert. He joined me on the show and went over his thoughts on the playoff picture, which is really valuable insight when you're going to a betting expert to give you that kind of insight on projecting, playoff standings. So make sure to check that out. And I will see you guys probably a little later. Thanks.